So I was listening to Joe Rogan podcast in the car, and I wanted to share a topic while I still had it on my mind. So I just put this thing running. I don't plan on talking to you, but so I can record it. Cool people do this all the time. They just record stuff while they're driving. So I thought, hey, I might as well do that too. The idea was of the micronization. Well, they didn't use that word. The topic was surrounding the election cycle and whether or not mainstream media is going to be the main source through which people gather information, through which people decide who they vote for. Basically, is it going to be your source of information, deciding factors of whether or not you're going to vote for X, Y, or Z? And I thought that was an interesting topic because the parallels to the pitfalls of even just not mainstream media, but TV in general, and the current ability to micronize and localize your interests in a more free-form content type packaged element is changing the landscape of media as a whole. On my TV, I have one of those smart TVs, and I'm able to have the YouTube app on there. And that YouTube app allows me to watch, whomever make YouTube videos. There's a certain couple of people I like, they make these cool documentaries. And time again, I think about, wow, this is just as good, if not better, than actual television. And what's interesting about that is if you think about television, you are stuck within a certain framework of time. For example, you might have a 30-minute slot, and within that 30-minute slot, 24 operable minutes, because 6 of those minutes are given to advertisement. So you have to construct a product that fits within a framework. It's not make a product and then have the framework fit it, which is the smart TV example, where they made a product, they made YouTube, people made videos on YouTube, it's free-form content, so the TV provider said, okay, how do we make this work on a television? I'm going to put it in free-form content type app, so you can just click the video, watch the video, we'll put ads on there so the people who make the videos can monetize it, but there is no limit in terms of the time frame. Now, I train people, I work people out, I'm a strength coach, and that's one thing that came up time, and no pun intended, maybe all pun intended, time and time again with training athletes in the collegiate setting or even in a private setting where I didn't have as much control, is that you had to fit your training within a block period of time. You had to provide whatever training session in a half-hour window, an hour window, or an hour and a half, so 90-minute window. It wasn't like you're going to go 45 minutes or 57 minutes or 38 minutes. You weren't going to do exactly what the person needed regardless of time. You were going to fill the time, make sure they got what they needed, but also you had filling the time demand. So regardless of the workout you had written out, if it didn't fit the time schedule and it was too long, you couldn't do the whole thing. And if it was too short, you'd modify it to add in filler to actually fulfill the time itself of the requirements. And so this gets back to the idea of micronization of information. And what I mean by that is you're allowed to take a very small topic and expand as much as you'd like on that topic, small, micro in that sense, without having to fill to a macro audience. For example, if you are the media and you have a 30-minute window, put out whatever newscast you have, you're going to want to touch on many different topics because you have a wide variety of people watching it. It's just the news, very general. It's not specific to basketball news or baseball news or local news. And what you see kind of come up from this, they call these micro-influencers now, people who are very good at specific categories of information and they excel at it and they put out great content and people engage in that content, is we as the consumer now have the ability to search out content. We actually have the ability to specialize in our advertisements to create specific reach with our content. While that's a negative in the sense you might get a bunch of ads, it's a positive in the sense of people who are trying to reach local people. And as weird as it sounds, it's almost like we have become some sort of a loop where initially we started off in the situation where information was very global. Well, there wasn't enough information, and then we started providing information like 3 TV channels, 4 TV channels, and then 1 million TV channels, and now it's like we shrunk back down because we want specific topics, but now within specific topics, we're expanding upon those. And it creates this loop, and maybe it's coming back full center now that we, the consumer, have the ability to actually search for our information, because that is novel. Before, you had restrictions on time, when the show was going to be shown on TV, what time it was going to be seen. Then you had on demand, so you could at least watch the movies you wanted to, the episodes you wanted to, but they were still being derived from that form of media, that is like television or whatever. Now we have, like I said, the ability to create with freedom and then consume with freedom, which then makes you, the creator, in an interesting position that we've never been in before, because you can have impactful reach at a different scale than whatever existed. Because in the past, if you wanted to put something in the newspaper, you had to pay for it. There's a financial limitation, there's a viewership limitation. It's not being sent to selected people. Same thing with a commercial or a billboard. But now you can make information, and you can make a product, I guess, on, say, me in the car driving and talking to a phone by myself, that might reach, I don't know, a couple hundred people, maybe 1,000 people, but they're people who are interested in this topic. And so it's not just an arbitrary reach, it's a more specific reach that potentially has a higher yield in terms of who's seen it and what they're getting out of it, and the total engagement with it. So at the end of the day, being aware of the changing landscape is really important, but also being aware of the opportunities within that changing landscape is critical. And so I thought the conversation around an election cycle and the idea of mainstream media maybe losing some of its potency with an election cycle, and how that's actually very much parallel with just about everything else in our culture in terms of information, in terms of product, in terms of things being put out there. There's a huge wave of individual creators, and I'm curious as to what that's going to do in the long run. We'll eventually just create almost like a flood of individual creators, and people will then eventually gravitate towards specific creators, and those people will then eventually become mainstream media, and they will become a conglomeration of entities, and then it will break up. It's this natural cycle and ebb and flow that we have of nature, where we create competition, then we create insulation around competition. That insulation reduces creativity, then their competition becomes more creative at a smaller scale, because the larger you get at scale, the more risk you have in theory. If you have a big company and you're going to lose all your business, that's a lot of business you're going to lose. If you're a small company with nothing to lose, really willing to try lots of different things. And so is it going to have this cyclic loop of condensation of information, and then it's going to expand again and condense and expand and condense? I don't know, because obviously we haven't had the framework through which information can be put out. Also, you can think about the time frame cycle of that, because you have information and that, expansion, and I should call it expansion retraction, that's occurring super quickly, because you can real time see who your competition is because of YouTube, because of TikTok and social media and all these other platforms. And because of that wide variety, or that fast cycle of information, you can then act accordingly. You can see certain popular trends, certain bits of creativity that people are finding success with. So as a consumer, think about it in the back of your mind. Don't get so caught up in chasing the current popular demand, because the popular trend, more times than not, unless you catch it early on, you're already late to it. You want to seek out some of these new trends, and kind of dependent on your risk portfolio and your ability to make information, make a product, make content, scale that content, and how many consumers you have listening to that content, you might be more keen on trying a new variety of things, because you're not going to feel like you're losing an audience, versus if you're stuck with an audience, then you have to cater to that audience and kind of move segmentally in a certain direction, maybe from A to 8.1 or 8.2, versus from A to letter E, and making a huge jump that your audience doesn't relate with, and so you run the risk of losing the entire engagement process. So some things to think about it. So I heard that on a podcast, and so I was like, oh, I wanted to share that with you all as I drive. I got a little bit of a drive here, and I want to take the time to share my thoughts as they're still fresh on my mind. So I hope you guys enjoy. As always, appreciate you listening. Take care, subscribe, and as always, drive safe.